Welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a like. Enjoy the video. A teenager exposes a corrupt billionaire, unknowingly igniting a citywide revolution. The Pinnacle Shopping Mall stood as a shining symbol of wealth and extravagance in the center of the city. Its polished marble floors, designer boutiques, and upscale restaurants catered to the elite, standing in stark contrast to the struggling neighborhoods that surrounded it. On this particular Saturday afternoon, 15-year-old Malik Johnson found himself wandering through the mall's corridors. He wasn't there to shop. His single mother could barely afford their rent, let alone the luxury items on display. No. Malik was there for the air conditioning, seeking relief from the oppressive summer heat that enveloped his neighborhood. As he walked, Malik couldn't help but notice the stares and suspicious glances coming his way. His worn sneakers and faded t-shirt marked him as an outsider in this temple of affluence. Security guards seemed to appear wherever he went, their eyes never leaving him. Malik sighed, accustomed to this treatment but still frustrated by it. He was about to leave when he heard a commotion near the elevators. A group of well-dressed individuals emerged, laughing and talking loudly. At their center was a family that screamed old money, perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and an air of entitlement that parted the crowd before them. The Prescott family had arrived. Mason Prescott, the patriarch, led the group. His expensive suit and confident stride spoke of power and influence. Beside him, his wife Evelyn walked with practiced grace, though Malik thought he noticed a flicker of something. Concern? Fear? In her eyes when she glanced at her husband. Behind them came their children. Taylor, a teenage girl engrossed in her phone, and Brandon, a younger boy who appeared bored with the whole affair. Ringing up the rear was a nanny pushing a stroller with a baby inside. As the group made their way toward the rooftop garden, a recent addition to the mall offering panoramic views of the city, Malik couldn't help but overhear their conversation. "I still don't see why we had to come here, Dad," Taylor whined. "It's not like we can't afford our own private garden." Mason chuckled. "It's about being seen, sweetheart. Making connections. You never know who you might meet in a place like this." Malik rolled his eyes. He was about to head for the exit when something caught his attention. The nanny had stopped to adjust her shoe, letting go of the stroller for just a moment, and in that instant, the unthinkable occurred. The stroller began to roll. At first, it was slow, barely noticeable. But as it gained speed heading toward the rooftop garden's edge, Malik's heart leaped into his throat. The Prescotts, wrapped up in their own world, hadn't noticed. The other shoppers, too intimidated by the family's status, hesitated to act. Malik didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the stroller, his worn sneakers hitting the polished floor. Time seemed to slow as he raced against the rolling stroller, seeing the edge of the roof getting closer, and hearing the startled cries of onlookers finally realizing what was happening. With a desperate lunge, Malik grabbed the stroller just as its front wheels teetered over the edge. He pulled it back, his arms straining with effort, and collapsed to the ground with the stroller safely beside him. For a moment there was silence, then chaos erupted. The baby, startled by the sudden movement, began to wail. Evelyn Prescott rushed forward, scooping the child into her arms with a cry of relief. The nanny babbled apologies, her face pale with shock, and Mason Prescott, his face a mask of fury, stormed toward Malik. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he bellowed, looming over the boy who had just saved his nephew's life. Malik, still catching his breath, looked up in confusion. I was just trying to—" "Kidnap my brother's child, weren't you?" Mason accused, his voice dripping with venom. Malik, still catching his breath, looked up in shock. "What? No, I was saving the baby. The stroller was rolling toward the edge of the roof." But Mason wasn't listening. His face contorted with rage as he turned to the gathering crowd. "Did you all see that? This hoodlum tried to snatch my nephew right from under our noses." The onlookers began to murmur, their expressions a mix of confusion and growing suspicion. Malik felt a cold dread settling in his stomach as he realized how the situation looked. A young black teenager grabbing a stroller belonging to a wealthy white family. "But that's not what happened," Malik protested, his voice rising with desperation. "The stroller was unattended. It was rolling toward the edge. I just—" "Silence!" Mason roared, cutting him off. He turned to the security guards, who had begun to approach. "Arrest this would-be kidnapper immediately." Two burly men in uniform grabbed Malik's arms, their grips painfully tight. Malik struggled, panic rising in his chest. "No! Wait! You don't understand!" Evelyn Prescott, who had been clutching the now crying baby to her chest, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mason dear, perhaps we should listen to what the boy has to say. He does seem quite distressed." Mason shot his wife a withering glare. "Evelyn, don't be naive. This is clearly a ploy to gain sympathy. People like him," he gestured dismissively at Malik, "are always looking for opportunities to take advantage of their betters." The casual racism in Mason's words hung in the air, igniting Malik's anger. Even as fear gripped him, he opened his mouth to protest again. But before he could speak, another voice cut through the tension. "Actually, the young man is telling the truth." All heads turned to see an elderly woman step forward from the crowd. She held up her phone, which was still recording. "I caught the whole thing on video." The stroller was indeed rolling toward the edge, and this brave young man saved the baby. He's a hero, not a criminal. A hush fell over the crowd as the woman's words sank in. Mason's face contorted with a mix of emotions. Anger, frustration, and something darker that Malik couldn't quite place. For a moment, it seemed like Mason might argue. But then his expression smoothed into a practiced smile. "Well," he said, his voice suddenly jovial but with an undercurrent of tension, "it seems I may have jumped to conclusions. My apologies, young man. Thank you for your assistance." The words were polite, but the cold fury in Mason's eyes told a different story. He nodded curtly to the security guards, who reluctantly released Malik as the crowd began to disperse, murmuring about the excitement. Malik rubbed his sore arms and tried to calm his racing heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, the way Mason had been so quick to accuse him. The odd mix of emotions on his face when the truth came out. It all pointed to something more sinister than a simple misunderstanding. Malik's eyes darted around, taking in the scene. That's when he noticed something odd. Mason was having a heated, whispered conversation with the nanny, who looked increasingly distressed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," the nanny was saying, her voice trembling. "You said no one would get hurt." Mason's response was too low to hear, but the menace in his expression was clear. The nanny paled, nodded quickly, and hurried away. Malik's mind raced. What was going on here? The incident with the stroller? Had it been intentional? But why would anyone want to harm an innocent baby? Before he could ponder further, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Evelyn Prescott standing beside him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something that looked almost like fear. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said softly, pressing something into his hand. "What you did was incredibly brave, and be careful." Malik looked down to see a business card with a phone number hastily scrawled on the back. When he looked up again, Evelyn was already walking away, but not before he caught the fear in her eyes as she glanced at her husband. As the Prescott family gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far more sinister than a simple misunderstanding. The tension between Mason and Evelyn, the nanny's distress, and the oddly staged feel of the whole incident, it all pointed to a darker truth lurking beneath the surface. Malik pocketed the card and made his way toward the mall exit, his mind racing. He knew he should probably just go home and forget about the whole thing. After all, what could a 15-year-old boy from the wrong side of the tracks do against a powerful family like the Prescotts? But as he stepped out into the sweltering heat of the city, Malik realized he couldn't just walk away. Something was very wrong, and if his suspicions were correct, an innocent child's life might be in danger. He had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Malik found himself unable to shake the events at the mall from his mind. He debated whether to involve his mother, but she was already working 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. He didn't want to burden her with his suspicions, especially when he had no proof. So, after much deliberation, he decided to call the number Evelyn had given him. With trembling fingers he dialed, his heart pounding as the phone rang. 3 rings later, a cautious voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Prescott, this is Malik from the mall." There was a pause, then Evelyn's voice came through, hushed and urgent. "Malik, I'm glad you called. We need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow at the Central Park fountain at 2 p.m.? Come alone and make sure you're not followed." The call ended abruptly, leaving Malik with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. His instincts had been right. There was more to the Prescott family than met the eye, and Evelyn seemed to be reaching out for help. The next day, Malik made his way to Central Park, constantly looking over his shoulder to ensure he wasn't being followed. As he approached the fountain, he saw Evelyn sitting on a bench, her designer sunglasses and scarf doing little to disguise her identity. "Thank you for coming," she said as he sat down beside her. "Malik, I need your help. My husband, he's not the man the public thinks he is." The incident at the mall wasn't an accident. Mason orchestrated it. Malik's eyes widened in shock. But why? Why would he want to harm his own nephew? Evelyn's voice trembled as she spoke. "It's all about money and power. Mason's brother, the baby's father, is the true heir to the Prescott fortune. Mason has been trying to eliminate any competition for control of the family business here. He thought if something were to happen to the baby, his brother would be too distraught to challenge him." As Evelyn continued to speak, Malik learned of a web of corruption that extended far beyond a single family. Mason Prescott, it seemed, had his fingers in every pie, from corrupt city officials to local gang members he used to do his dirty work. The Pinnacle Mall itself was at the center of a massive money laundering operation. "I've tried to gather evidence," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but Mason is too careful. He knows I'm onto him, and I'm afraid for my life." "But you, Malik, you're an outsider. You might be able to uncover the truth where I failed." Malik felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was just a kid from a struggling neighborhood, and yet here he was, being asked to take on one of the most powerful men in the city. It was dangerous, possibly even foolish. But then he thought of the baby in the stroller, of the lives Mason Prescott had likely ruined in his quest for power. He thought of his own neighborhood, struggling under the weight of poverty and neglect, while people like Mason lived in luxury. A determination he didn't know he possessed welled up inside him. "I'll help," Malik said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. "What do you need me to do?" Evelyn's relief was palpable. She quickly outlined a plan, speaking in hushed tones. She knew of a hidden safe in Mason's home office where he kept incriminating documents, and if Malik could somehow get into the house and retrieve those documents, they would have the evidence needed to bring Mason down. "But how am I supposed to get into your house, then?" Malik asked, bewildered. "I can't exactly walk through the front door." Evelyn smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Leave that to me. I'm hosting a charity gala next week. I'll arrange for you to be part of the catering staff. Once inside, I can guide you to the office." As they finalized the details of their plan, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distance, a phone held to their ear. The week passed in a blur of nervous anticipation for Malik. He told his mother he had gotten a job helping at a catered event, which wasn't entirely a lie. The night of the gala arrived, and Malik found himself dressed in a server's uniform, standing in the opulent foyer of the Prescott mansion. The house was a maze of marble and gold, filled with the city's elite in glittering gowns and tailored suits. Malik moved through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, his eyes constantly searching for Evelyn. He finally spotted her across the room, looking radiant in an emerald green gown. She caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. Following her discreet gestures, Malik made his way towards a secluded hallway. Just as he was about to slip away from the party, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "And where do you think you're going?" Malik's heart nearly stopped as he turned to face Mason Prescott, whose eyes glittered with malice. I was just looking for the restroom, sir," Malik stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. Mason's grip tightened painfully. "Don't lie to me, boy. I know why you're here. Did you really think you could outsmart me in my own home?" Before Malik could respond, chaos erupted in the main hall. The sound of breaking glass and screams filled the air. Mason's head whipped around, his grip on Malik loosening for just a moment. It was all the opening Malik needed. He twisted away and sprinted down the hallway, Mason's angry shouts echoing behind him. Malik's heart pounded as he raced through the unfamiliar house, desperately searching for the office Evelyn had described. He finally found it, slamming the door shut behind him and quickly locating the hidden safe behind a painting. His fingers trembled as he input the code Evelyn had given him, praying it would work. The safe clicked open just as the door burst open, revealing a furious Mason flanked by 2 security guards. "It's over, you little thief!" Mason snarled, advancing on Malik, but Malik wasn't done yet. In a desperate move, he grabbed the documents from the safe and darted toward the large bay window. Without hesitation, he crashed through it, tumbling onto the manicured lawn below. Ignoring the pain from cuts and bruises, Malik scrambled to his feet and ran into the night, clutching the precious documents to his chest. He could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit behind him, but he didn't dare look back as he ran. Malik's mind raced. He had the evidence. But what now? Where could he go that Mason's influence couldn't reach? Just then, a car screeched to a halt beside him. The passenger door flew open, revealing Evelyn in the driver's seat. "Get in!" she shouted. Malik didn't hesitate. He dove into the car and Evelyn sped away, leaving the sounds of pursuit behind. "We did it!" Evelyn. Her voice a mix of relief and anxiety as she navigated the car through the dark city streets. "I can't believe it actually worked." Malik, still catching his breath, clutched the documents tightly. "What now? Where are we going?" Evelyn's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I have a friend at the district attorney's office. We're going there right now. These documents should be enough to start an investigation into Mason's activities." As they drove, Malik's adrenaline began to wear off, and the reality of what they'd just done started to sink in. He had broken into someone's home, stolen documents, and was now fleeing with the wife of one of the most powerful men in the city. "Mrs. Prescott," Malik began hesitantly. "What's going to happen after we turn these in? Won't Mason come after us?" Evelyn's face was grim in the dim light of the dashboard. "That's why we need to act fast. Once these documents are in the right hands, it should provide enough leverage to keep Mason at bay. But you're right, Malik. It's not going to be easy." They arrived at a nondescript office building downtown. Evelyn parked in an underground garage and led Malik to a service elevator. As they rode up, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Malik, I want you to know how brave you've been. What you've done tonight, it's going to help a lot of people. But from here on out, things might get dangerous. Are you sure you want to see this through?" Malik thought about his mother, about his friends in the neighborhood, about all the people who suffered under the corrupt system that men like Mason Prescott perpetuated. He nodded firmly. "I'm sure. We've come too far to back out now." The elevator doors opened, revealing a woman in a sharp suit waiting for them. "Evelyn," she said, her eyes darting between them. "This must be serious if you're calling me in the middle of the night. And who's this?" "Sarah, this is Malik," Evelyn said, ushering them into a nearby office. "He's the one who got us the evidence." "Malik, this is Sarah Chan, Assistant District Attorney." Over the next hour, they laid out everything for Sarah. The incident at the mall, Mason's schemes, and the contents of the stolen documents. Sarah's expression grew increasingly grave as she pored over the papers. "This is explosive," she finally said, looking up at them. "If even half of this is true, we're looking at charges of attempted murder, corruption, money laundering. The list goes on." "But Evelyn, Malik, you need to understand. Going public with this will put you both in danger." "We understand the risks," Evelyn said firmly, "but it's time someone stood up to Mason and men like him." Sarah nodded, then turned to Malik. "Young man, you've shown incredible courage, but I need to ask, are your parents aware of what you've been involved in?" Malik's stomach dropped. In all the excitement, he hadn't even thought about how to explain this to his mother. "No," he admitted. "She thinks I was working at a catering job tonight." Sarah's expression softened. "I see. Well, the first thing we need to do is ensure both of your safety. I'm going to arrange for protective custody for you and your mother, Malik. Evelyn, you too will need to move fast before Mason realizes what's happening." As Sarah made calls and set things in motion, Malik felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. His life was about to change dramatically. But he knew in his heart that he was doing the right thing. Just then, Malik's phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. "Where are you? It's late. Please come home." Malik looked up at Evelyn and Sarah, his expression torn. Sarah nodded, understanding. "Go ahead, call her. Tell her you're safe, and that someone will be coming to explain everything, but don't give any details over the phone just in case." As Malik dialed his mother's number, he realized that this was just the beginning. The real fight against Mason Prescott and the corrupt system he represented was about to begin. But for the first time, Malik felt like they had a real chance at making a difference. As the phone rang, he took a deep breath, preparing himself for the difficult conversation ahead. "Malik, where are you?" His mother's worried voice came through the speaker. "Mom, I'm okay," Malik said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm safe. Something important has come up, and I can't explain everything right now, but someone will be coming to talk to you soon. Please trust me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Malik, what's going on? You're scaring me." "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry," Malik replied, his voice cracking slightly. "But I promise everything will be explained soon. I love you, and I'm doing this for us and for everyone in our neighborhood. Please just stay home and wait for someone to come. They'll explain everything." After reassuring his mother a few more times, Malik ended the call feeling a mix of guilt and resolve. He turned back to Sarah and Evelyn, who had been listening intently. Sarah nodded approvingly. "You handled that well, Malik. I'm sending a team to your home now to bring your mother to a safe location. We'll reunite you two soon." Over the next few hours, Sarah's office became a hub of frantic activity. More officials arrived, poring over the documents and making calls. Malik and Evelyn provided statements recounting every detail of their interactions with Mason and the events that led to this moment. As dawn broke, Sarah gathered them for an update. "We've made significant progress," she said, her eyes tired but determined. "Based on the evidence you've provided, we've secured warrants for Mason Prescott's arrest and for searches of his properties and businesses. The operation is being coordinated as we speak." Evelyn let out a shaky breath. "So it's really happening after all this time?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. The case against Mason will be complex, and he has powerful allies. We'll need both of you to testify." Malik felt a surge of determination. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said firmly. Just then, there was a commotion outside the office. The door burst open, and Malik's heart leapt as he saw his mother rush in, followed by two officers. "Malik!" she cried, engulfing him in a tight hug. "What's going on? These people showed up at our apartment talking about danger and protective custody?" As Malik held his mother, he looked over her shoulder at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, he began to explain everything: the incident at the mall, his suspicions about Mason, and the dangerous game he'd been playing over the past week. His mother's expressions ranged from shock to fear to pride as Malik recounted the events. When he finished, she cupped his face in her hands, tears in her eyes. "Oh, Malik, my brave, foolish boy, you could have been killed." "I know, Mom," Malik said softly, "but I couldn't stand by and do nothing, not when I had a chance to make things right." As mother and son reconciled, Sarah approached them. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this is a lot to take in, but I want to assure you that we're doing everything we can to keep Malik safe. You both will be placed in protective custody until we can guarantee your security." Malik's mother nodded, still processing everything. "And what happens now?" Sarah's expression turned serious. "Now we prepare for a fight. Mason Prescott won't go down easily. There will be trials, both in the court and in the media. It won't be easy, but with Malik and Evelyn's testimony, we have a real chance at exposing the corruption that's been plaguing the city for far too long." As the sun rose over the city, casting a golden light through the office windows, Malik felt a mix of emotions: fear for the challenges ahead, but also hope. He looked around at the determined faces surrounding him. His mother, Evelyn, Sarah, and the other officials working tirelessly to bring justice. He realized that this was bigger than just him now. It was about standing up for what was right, about giving a voice to those who had been silenced by power and corruption. As daunting as the road ahead seemed, Malik knew he was no longer alone in this fight. He had allies now, people who believed in justice as much as he did. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Malik and his mother were moved to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. It was a modest but comfortable place, a far cry from their cramped apartment in the city. Despite the circumstances, Malik's mother seemed to relax a little in their new surroundings, away from the constant stress of making ends meet. Evelyn was housed separately for her safety, but they kept in touch through secure channels set up by Sarah's team. The news of Mason Prescott's arrest had exploded across all media platforms. The city was in an uproar, with new revelations coming to light each day about the extent of his corruption. Malik spent his days preparing for the upcoming trial with Sarah and her team of lawyers. They went over his testimony again and again, making sure every detail was clear and accurate. It was exhausting work, but Malik was determined to see it through. One evening, as Malik sat on the porch of the safe house watching the sunset, Sarah joined him. She looked tired, but there was a glint of excitement in her eyes. "Malik, I've got some news," she said, sitting down next to him. "We've had a major breakthrough. Some of Mason's associates, seeing the writing on the wall, have decided to cooperate with the investigation." "In exchange for what?" Malik's eyes widened. "Really? What does that mean for the case?" Sarah smiled. "It means we're not just looking at taking down Mason Prescott anymore. We're uncovering an entire network of corruption that spans city officials, business leaders, even some law enforcement. Your actions have set off a chain reaction that could clean up this city in ways we never imagined possible." As the implications of this sank in, Malik felt a mix of pride and trepidation. But won't that make things more dangerous? There must be a lot of powerful people who don't want this to come out. Sarah nodded gravely. "You're right, and that's why we're increasing security for all of our key witnesses, including you and Evelyn. But Malik, I want you to know something." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "What you've done, the courage you've shown, it's inspiring people. We're getting calls from citizens all over the city. People who want to come forward with information, who want to help." Malik absorbed this information, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He thought about his neighborhood, about all the people struggling under a system that seemed designed to keep them down. For the first time, he could see a glimmer of real hope for change. The day of the trial arrived sooner than Malik expected. As he stood outside the imposing courthouse adjusting the tie of the new suit Sarah's team had provided, he felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach. His mother squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You've got this, baby," she said softly. "Just tell the truth like you always do." As they climbed the steps, Malik saw Evelyn arriving with her security detail. She looked pale but determined. Their eyes met, and they shared a nod of solidarity. They were in this together. Inside the courtroom, Malik's breath caught as he saw Mason Prescott for the first time since that night at the gala. The man looked diminished somehow, his usual aura of power and arrogance replaced by a grim defiance. As their eyes met, Mason's narrowed in anger, but Malik refused to look away. He wasn't that scared kid from the mall anymore. The trial began, and Malik listened as the prosecution laid out their case, detailing the vast web of corruption and crime that Malison had woven through the city. When it was his turn to testify, Malik took a deep breath and stepped up to the witness stand. As he began to speak, telling his story clearly and confidently, he could feel the weight of the entire courtroom's attention. As Malik recounted the events that had led to this moment, he realized something profound. This wasn't just about taking down one corrupt businessman. It was about giving a voice to all those who had been silenced. About showing that even the most powerful could be held accountable. It was about hope and the belief that ordinary people, when they stood together, could change the world. As the trial progressed over the following weeks, more witnesses came forward, each testimony adding to the mountain of evidence against Mason Prescott and his network of corruption. Evelyn's testimony was particularly powerful, providing an insider view of the criminal enterprise that had operated under the guise of legitimate business for so long. The city watched with bated breath as the case unfolded. Every day, new revelations shook the foundations of local government and business. Some of Mason's former allies, seeing the tide turn, rushed to make deals with the prosecution in exchange for leniency. Finally, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict was announced. Mason Prescott was found guilty on all counts, along with several of his key associates. The judge's sentencing was severe, ensuring that Mason would spend the rest of his life behind bars. As Malik left the courthouse after the verdict, he was surprised to find a crowd of people waiting outside. There were residents from his old neighborhood, community activists, and even some faces he recognized from the news. They cheered as he emerged, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Malik," and "Heroes come in all ages." In the days that followed, the city began the long process of healing and reform. Sarah Chan, now hailed as the prosecutor who brought down the Prescott empire, was at the forefront of new anti-corruption initiatives. Evelyn, true to her word, used her share of the Prescott fortune to establish foundations focused on community development and youth empowerment in the city's underserved neighborhoods. As for Malik and his mother, they were finally able to leave protective custody and start a new chapter in their lives. With some of the reward money from the case, they moved into a comfortable home in a safer neighborhood. Malik's mother no longer had to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Malik himself became something of a local hero. He was invited to speak at schools and community centers, sharing his story and encouraging other young people to stand up for what's right. He used his newfound platform to advocate for better education and opportunities in underprivileged areas. One sunny afternoon, about a year after the trial, Malik stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new community center in his old neighborhood. As he looked out at the crowd of smiling faces, he saw hope where there had once been resignation. He saw pride where there had once been shame. Sarah Chan, now running for district attorney, approached him after the ceremony. "You know, Malik," she said with a smile, "when this all started, I thought we were just going after one corrupt businessman. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Malik nodded, looking around at the vibrant community that was emerging from the shadows of corruption. "I didn't either," he admitted, "but I've learned something important through all of this." "What's that?" Sarah asked. Malik smiled, thinking back to that fateful day at the mall that had set everything in motion. "I've learned that change doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it starts with one person who refuses to look the other way, who decides to take a stand no matter how small they might feel." As he walked home that evening, Malik felt a sense of peace and purpose. The city still had its problems, and there was still much work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, there was a real sense of hope in the air. And Malik knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same courage and determination that had brought him this far. The story of Malik Thompson, the teenager who took down a corrupt empire, would be told for years to come. But for Malik himself, it was just the beginning of a lifelong commitment to justice and community. As he looked to the future, he knew that the greatest adventures and the most important battles still lay ahead. Here on Karma's Twists, we share the most impactful stories of karma and justice that the world needs to see. Don't miss a single moment of good triumphing over evil. Join our community and subscribe. Be part of the movement that believes justice always wins.